Okay, thank you everyone for coming tonight. On behalf of CNYC and our speakers, I'd like to welcome you to our class on engaging residents to ensure a successful composting program. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rebecca Poole, and I'm the Director of Membership and Communication for the Council of New York Cooperatives and Condominiums. We're very grateful to Jacquelyn Ottman, an advocate for zero food waste, and one of our speakers this evening for proposing this class to us. Before we get started, just a little background on CNYC. We're a membership organization that provides information, advocacy, and education for New York City cooperatives and condominiums. Through our advocacy, we strive to safeguard the financial viability, way of life, and sense of community sought by cooperative and condominium homeowners such as yourselves. Our efforts have produced multiple victories, including the co-op condo tax abatement, a reduction in the number of drops required for FISP inspections, and reverse mortgages in co-ops. In addition to our advocacy, we have evening classes such as tonight's class, and we host an annual housing conference with over 42 classes, which is coming up on Sunday, November 17th on Zoom. Registration is open, and we hope that you'll join us. And now for tonight's class, some quick housekeeping. The speakers have seen the questions that you submitted in advance and will try to answer them during their presentations, but you can also enter additional questions into the Q&A, and I'll introduce them during natural breaks or read them, when the speakers are done with their presentations. With us tonight, we have Jacquelyn Ottman, advocate for zero food waste. She's a past chair of the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, former instructor for Local 32BJ, and the principal author of 2 free guides for engaging residents of New York City multifamilies in recycling and organics collection. And also with us tonight, we have Hillary Bosch, the outreach coordinator for the New York City Department of Sanitation. We're very grateful to both of them for spending their time to help us tonight as we learn how to comply with the new regulations. And we're going to start off with Hillary. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. As Rebecca said, my name is Hillary. I work at the Department of Sanitation in the Bureau of Public Affairs. I've been working on curbside composting for a little over 3 years now, so it's very, very exciting to see this finally go citywide. I know there have been a lot of versions of composting since the 90s in New York City, and then especially this version looks a little different. So today I'll be talking through both some service updates, some best practices, and then what this could look like for your building. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Wonderful. So let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm going to front load with the most important information and then give some more details as we go through. Rebecca was able to send many of your questions. I'll try to answer as many of them as I can during the presentation. And then, of course, any that I missed, you can ask after. Also, if you'd like to get in touch with our team directly, if you have a more nuanced question specifically about your building, our email is outreach@dsny.nyc.gov. I'll be sure to put that in the chat later as well. Okay, so off the bat, service is officially citywide. It's been going on in Queens and Brooklyn for a little over a year now. Queens for some time, Brooklyn over a year. And it just started in the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island last week, which is really, really great. This is the first time curbside composting is truly citywide, truly accessible by every resident. It's also the largest curbside composting program in North America. So we're very excited to beat our wonderful neighbors to the west who have been composting for some time with the largest and easiest to use program that we've rolled out. The biggest updates, if you leave with anything, these are the things that I really want you to remember. Number one, you don't have to do anything for your building to start composting. It will be very similar to recycling collection in that any residential building can participate. Anywhere where the Department of Sanitation collects recycling and trash, we will now collect compost. Just as a point of clarification, the New York City Department of Sanitation, the agency, only collects waste from residential buildings, schools, nonprofits, and agencies. Institutions or establishments that do not receive sanitation collection can include private schools and commercial businesses. So everything I'm about to talk about tonight specifically pertains to primarily residential buildings and then nonprofits, houses of worship, and Department of Education schools. If you are involved with a business or a private venture that is interested in composting, that's something you can coordinate with your private carder. All right, so number one, you don't have to sign up for anything. Your residential building, you're all set. You can just go ahead and start composting the same way you start recycling. Number two, collection will be the same day as your recycling. We now see this group of material as a recyclable category, and so we're picking it up the same day, once a week collection, the same day as your recycling. If you Google NYC Sanitation Collection Day, there's a form where you can put in your address and find out where your recycling collection day is if you want to know. And then last, but definitely not least, the biggest update with this is that as we have expanded accessibility to service, the mandate to separate food scraps from the trash has coincided with that expansion. The mandate to separate both food scraps and leaf and yard waste. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that mandate involves a little more in depth. The first part of that is leaf and yard waste. This mandate stems from a Department of Sanitation rule that went into effect when we first started in Queens, because we see this type of material as being the easiest to separate out. You know, you're working in your yard, you're mowing your lawn, you're bagging leaves, it's kind of already separate. So it's easier to build this habit more quickly. For this category of material, this can be anything from your leaves or yard, or including house plants, if you have flowers, if you have failed herb gardens like myself, all of this would also be included in leaf and yard waste. For this category of material, there is a 3-month warning period before anyone would be subject to a fine. So for Brooklyn and Queens, 3 months is up. They've had service for over a year, so they should start composting this ASAP or you get a fine. For the 3 boroughs that just started service last week, you will have 3 months to get into the habit of separating this material out and setting it out with your recycling and not the trash. The separation of food waste and food soiled paper, this is where we realize it's going to be a bit more of a learning curve. Jackie's going to talk a lot more about that next. And this is really where these habits will need to be formed. And so this rule, the mandatory composting of food and food soiled paper, stems from a city council law that was passed last year. We in the city council, of course, like I said, understand this is a bigger learning curve. So the warning period for all boroughs extends through April 1st of 2025. So regardless of whether you've been composting for a year and a half in Queens or you just started composting last week at Staten Island, you will have 6 months from last week to get on board, to get in the practice of separating your food waste and setting it out for composting apart from the trash before you could receive a fine. So why am I bothering to talk about this at all? Why are we bothering to ask millions of people to separate their food scraps and yard waste? Why do we care? And there are a couple of reasons. This is a really good program. It has few drawbacks and has a lot of successes that are within our grasp, both locally, citywide, nationally, globally. Hyper locally, we want to lock this stuff up. This is the stuff that pests and rodents want. And so we want to lock it in a compost bin. We don't want you to put it in a plastic trash bag on the curb where it's going to get ripped open and then, you know, there's a pile of food scraps there in the morning. That is one of my biggest pet peeves. So locally, we've heard from, you know, many supers, many building, you know, staff that I've spoken to that this program has helped in reducing pest activity by locking that material up and making these bins rat resistant. Locally, we want to use this as a resource. The city sees this as a valuable stream of stuff. So much like recycling, we want to collect this in order to make something new out of it. I'm not going to say that your pizza crust will magically become a pizza crust again, but I'll talk a little bit more about the resources that we want to make with this material. Long story short, we're asking you to do it because we want this material. We want you to lock it up, first of all, but we want this stuff specifically. All right. And then thirdly, we want to divert this material from landfills. Like I said, we see this as a resource. So of course we want to, you know, continue using it. And if it goes to a landfill, it's wasted. But also when this material specifically goes to a landfill, it breaks down and creates methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas 25 to 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So it is not only essential that A, we make a resource out of it, but B, we prevent that from going into the atmosphere. So local benefits, city benefits, global benefits. This is really good for everybody, and I'm so excited it's rolling out citywide. All right. So hopefully you have been convinced, or at least you have the tools to convince the rest of your boards or your neighbors or your family or your friends. Half of this is me filling in any gaps of information that you may have, but also trying to give you the talking points and the tools to talk to your family, your friends, your neighbors about this, to be resources yourselves. So now that you know why we want you to do it, lock up rat food, make a local resource, prevent climate change. Let's talk about what this stuff actually is. What's in this stream? If you've been composting with the city for a while or composting at all, you've probably seen different kinds of stuff that are accepted. So for example, if you've dropped out food scraps at your local green market or with Grow NYC, maybe sometimes they don't accept certain things like meat or bones or dairy, or if you even composted at home, sometimes you can't process those things. I'm pleased to say we can take all of that. We can take anything from your yard, anything from your kitchen, any kind of leaf and yard waste, any kind of food waste, including meat, bones, dairy, cooked foods, uncooked foods, greasy foods. If you have cooking oil, if you want to sop it up with a paper towel and compost that, we can take all of that. There is no more doubt, no more hesitation. If you're like, I don't know, this looks pretty gross or pretty hardy, go ahead and put it in there. We can process it. The category that I really see people get confused about, which is totally fair, is this food soiled paper category. And this is really the stuff that is paper that is no longer clean enough to recycle. Things that are more obvious are like coffee filters, tea bags, napkins, paper plates. But something that might be a little more confusing is a pizza box. If it's generally pretty clean, there's like one grease spot on it, you can go ahead and put that in your paper recycling. But if it's really cheesy, really greasy, I would recommend putting that into your compost bin. Uh, Rebecca, please feel free to stop me at any times for questions because I'm just going to keep rolling. But I did see a question in advance about coated paper versus uncoated paper. And that is a really, really good question. We actually don't want coated paper in this compost bin because that coating is typically plastic and we cannot compost plastic. So if you have a paper coffee cup that has a waxy film along the inside or outside, you can continue to put that in your trash, unfortunately. Some examples of material that we don't want in your compost bin, apart from anything from your yard, anything from your kitchen, are things like pet waste, medical waste, hygiene products, diapers. Although that kind of stuff may be technically biodegradable, it does create a potentially dangerous situation for our workers and for the folks that we give out compost to after it's finished, and we don't want to foster any pathogens in this waste stream. So anything like that, pet waste, medical waste, diapers, you can continue to put that in your trash. And then, of course, any typical trash or recycling, you can continue putting that in those typical categories. All right, so you know why we want it, you know what we want. Now let's talk about what we're going to do with this. What's really cool about this material, unlike the material that we collect for the refuse waste stream, for landfills, or for recycling, we process this hyper locally. So a good chunk of our material is sent to the Staten Island compost facility, which is atop the old Fresh Kills landfill. Really, you know, New York's future on top of New York's past. It's a very cool facility. They just expanded it by 2,000% as well. So it is able to process a huge amount of material, which is really, really cool. And the compost that we create here, the finished compost, we sell to landscapers and we give away free to residents and schools and community gardens to put back in our parks and gardens. So your food scraps may be going back in your local park, which I think is really, really cool. Another place that we send some material that we collect are anaerobic digester facilities, such as this photo here, which is the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant. If you've driven on the BQE or flown into LaGuardia, odds are you've seen it. It's hard to miss. They're humongous. They look like spaceships. Here, we mixed collected compost with collected wastewater, and we anaerobically digest it, which sounds very intense and scary, but it's not. All we do is we break it down and we turn it into something called biogas. This biogas is actually fairly similar to the gases that it would create were it sent to a landfill. However, unlike a landfill, we're not just emitting it directly into the atmosphere and saying, oh, well, climate change is happening. What we do is we capture this material, we purify it, and this facility is now hooked up to the grid, and this biogas is used as a substitute for natural gas, which, if you're thinking of sustainability, diverting waste from landfills, using it as a resource, and the resource is reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and replacing our use of fossil fuels, it is the ultimate sustainable use of this material. It's really cool. If you would like to learn more about this facility, because I could talk about it for the entire time of this presentation, you can look up on YouTube a virtual tour of the wastewater treatment plant. It's a really great virtual tour. I would highly recommend it. All right, so I know this is the curbside composting show, but I'm just going to briefly touch on these smart bins. Odds are you've seen them around, but I am surprised how many people have not seen them, which I think just goes to show how chaotic the city can be, that you might miss a gigantic orange bin on the sidewalk, which is totally fair. But there are 400 of them citywide across all 5 boroughs. These are not going anywhere. These will be staying in place. So if you've gotten into a habit of using one of these bins and you want to keep using it, go for it. Amazing. I personally use one of these because I like to get my compost out of my house a little more quickly. And you can access these bins 24/7 using the NYC Compost app. That's the name of the app, NYC Compost. It's free and you can get it at any of the major app stores. I would really recommend, even if your building has curbside composting, you still download the app because you never know when you'll be on the move with an apple core or a pizza crust or something compostable that you want to put in the right place. So these are really, really great, and these won't be going anywhere. All right, back to the good stuff. All right, so this is really important because it's how you get the material to us correctly. You've gone through the steps of separating it in your kitchen. You've separated this material in your apartment. How do you get it from your building to the curb to us correctly to ensure it goes to the correct location, namely that Staten Island compost facility or the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant? And there are a couple options. If you've been composting with us in the past, or if you've lived in an area that had service right after COVID where you could sign up, there was a requirement that you had to use a DSNY brown bin. That is no longer a requirement. You can use a DSNY brown bin if you'd like, but you could also use any bin as long as it's under 55 gallons because food waste gets really heavy. Number 2 has a lid. And number 3 is somehow labeled as compost, so sanitation workers know what it is. If you would like a brown bin and you live in the Bronx, Staten Island, or Manhattan, you can order a free one for your building by the end of October. So if you live in one of those 3 boroughs and you want a free brown bin, please go to our website, nyc.gov/curbside composting to order it. We're offering 1 free bin per building. But of course, if you're in a building with basically any more than 20 units, odds are you'll likely need another bin. So you can, as I said, use any labeled bin with a lid and under 55 gallons, and then just somehow labeled as compost. Or if you like the brown bins, I personally like them a lot. I think the latch is really helpful. You can purchase additional brown bins at the website bins.nyc. Just bins.nyc. All of that information is also available on the website if you want to get specifically brown bins, but they're not required. Also, something that is not required, but I would strongly recommend, is lining your bin with a bag. You will find out fairly quickly if you do not line the bin with a bag that it can get pretty gross. But if you don't want to, that's fine. It's totally optional. Please use either a paper bag, biodegradable bag, or a clear plastic bag. Please do not use black plastic trash bags because those can gum up the machines that we use to sort out compost. And also sometimes sanitation workers see a black bag and they think it's trash. So one of these bags, please. I have heard from sanitation workers also that they do prefer the clear plastic bags, if only because they hold up throughout the week between collections and it's more easy for them to just pull out the bag. But please use whatever works best for you or no bag at all. If you do choose to use a bag, we just recommend that you tie it closed before putting it out on the curb for collection. Just any additional barrier to keep the odors in and the pests out is recommended, either using a bag and then tying it shut. A question I've gotten before that I'll talk about a little later as well is if people can use bags, like smaller bags for their compost inside the bin. And the answer is yes, you can. If you would like to bag your food waste in a biodegradable bag or a takeout bag, you could do that. I'm sorry, Rebecca, were you going to say something?
That was exactly the question I was
Oh,
queuing up for
great.
you. So
I read your mind. No. But yes, if you like to do that, not mandatory, but I would personally say that the more barriers around your food waste between it and the outside world full of pests and grossness, the better. So personally, I use a biodegradable bag or a takeout bag just to bag it up when I put it in the bin with the bag and the bin with the bag and all that good stuff. Okay. Leaf and yard waste. Oh, I should also clarify, I didn't mention the most obvious thing. All food scraps 100% have to be in a bin when you set them out for collection. This is the stuff that the pests want. And if you just put it in a bag on the curb, you will not get those localized pest mitigation benefits that I was talking about. So please do not set out food waste in a bag on the curb. In contrast, you can set out yard waste just in a bag on the curb because this is not the stuff that the critters want nearly as much. They want your pizza crusts way more than they want your Christmas tree. So if you have room in your bin or you have extra bins, please feel free to put this material in your bin. But you could also just put it out in a bag, either in a paper lawn and leaf bag, which is just a paper bag, or a clear plastic bag. Clear just so that sanitation workers can see what's in it and they don't confuse it for trash. This last bullet point here about twigs and branches has been on the books for a while, but we just ask that any twigs or branches be no bigger than 2 feet by 4 feet, just so that we can fit them in the truck. All right, so we're nearing the end. Now that you are all compost experts and advocates, here are some of the most common questions that we get, that you will probably get as you talk about this with other people. And so I just want to dispel slash inform on these main subjects. The number one thing that we hear is that composting attracts rats and other pests. And the truth is that this material does. It would, if it's in the compost bin, it would if it's in the trash. And our goal with composting is to prevent rats and other pests. We've worked very closely with the Department of Health over the past couple of years to encourage curbside composting as an initial pest mitigation tool. And so if you go to one of their rat academy trainings, which is a real thing, it's 2 hours about rats, they'll talk plenty about trash and compost containerization. I will say one of the biggest problems I see that could potentially cause pests are people leaving the bin open, which then you don't get all of those containerized benefits. This is primarily a problem that I've seen in larger apartment buildings because there are a lot of people using the bin. Something that I would suggest that I didn't come up with, that another building came up with, is that they have a poster or a sign inside the lid saying, if you are reading this, close the lid. Do not leave the lid open. That is super, super, super important that you keep the bin closed anytime you are not actively using it. All right, number two question we get, composting is complicated. I get it. It could be composting hard in the past when you're like, okay, meat or bones or dairy, I don't know. Now, anything from your kitchen, anything from your yard, any kind of plant stuff. If you're in doubt, it's fine. If you have, a tissue that you're like, what is it? Or a paper towel, just go ahead and put it in your compost bin. If it's any kind of paper product, that's okay. Including meat, bones, dairy, cooked foods you forgot about, all that good stuff. As I mentioned, you now can put plastic bags in your bin. You might even see some stuff online or some old bins that say you can't. And this is because as of 5 years ago, we were not able to separate out plastic bags from the bins. But we want this material so bad. This material is so valuable to us because we want to use it as compost and energy that we have invested in the machinery to separate out these plastic bags. That's how badly we want it. It's called depackaging machinery. Lastly, but definitely not least, there is a horrible rumor, misconception that recycling is just thrown away or that compost is just thrown away. I promise you, we would not go through all of this effort. I would not be talking to you at 6:30 p.m. If this was not important and that we didn't care about it. We care deeply about collecting this material. I cannot speak for other municipalities. I can't speak for Jersey or Long Island, but I can say that if you recycle or you compost with the city of New York, we are going to use that material as a resource. Um, so please compost with us. You may see your trash and compost going into the same truck. Be not afraid. We are repurposing a lot of our recycling trucks to collect this to make our routes more efficient. So our recycling trucks, as you already aware, there are two categories of recycling: metal, glass, plastic, and paper. The trucks have two compartments. We're repurposing those trucks to collect half trash, half compost. So although they're going in the same truck, they have two different destinations. Some tips for food waste inside your home, while you're cooking or while you're prepping. Containerization is key. Make sure you lock up or contain this material somehow in the time between your cooking and when you bring it to your buildings bin or when you bring it to one of those smart bins. You can containerize it with something as swanky as a stainless steel compost bin available for purchase at many retailers. Or something as simple as a Tupperware. I just use a Tupperware or a takeout container because it's easy. If you're getting started with composting or you have friends getting started with composting, I totally get that there's like an ick factor. This material can get pretty gross. Something that I would recommend is storing your food scraps in the freezer, and that prevents it from decaying or prevents odors between the time that you cook and you bring it to your buildings bin. Although I know plenty of folks who, bring their compost down to their buildings bin every day just to get it out of their house. You can do that as well. For your bin that you share with your neighbors, or if you're in a single family home, well, this is the co-op call, so I don't think any single family homes on here. For the bin that you share with your neighbors, number one, write your address on it. Number two, clean it as needed. It is a waste receptacle, so it will need occasional cleaning. Using a bag will cut down on how much you have to clean it. And then please, please, please keep the lid closed anytime you're not actively putting compost in it. This is super, super important to tell your neighbors and your co-op board members. So please make sure you keep that lid closed to prevent pests and get those containerization benefits. This is probably old news, but we just cover it, just to be safe. If you're using a bin to set out anything, whether it be trash, recycling, compost, you can set it out no earlier than 6 p.m., so 6 p.m. or later. And if you're using a bag, either for trash, recycling, or only yard waste, you can't set it out any earlier than 8 p.m. So 8 p.m. or later, just as an incentive to use bins. And of course, if you have food waste, it has to be in a bin. If you have yard waste, it can be in a bag. I want to draw your attention to this note down here. It says note about bulky trash items. This is in reference to what I mentioned about some of those split body trucks being used for compost and trash. This means that the compartment that collects trash is smaller and may not be able to pick up some of these larger items like mattresses or sofas or any other large trash item. So if you have large trash, please set it out on the trash collection day that you do not share with recycling and compost. Everywhere in the city has at least two trash collection days, one of which overlaps with recycling and compost. Please set out this bulky, this chunky stuff on the other day in the event that we're coming by with one of those split body trucks. So To break down a little bit more what this looks like, it is the responsibility of residents and tenants to source, separate this material. But that just means the same way you do for recycling, separate it inside your apartment. And then it is the responsibility of building staff, of supers, of whoever manages waste at your building to care for the bin, provide postage, provide educational materials, and then, of course, to take out the bin weekly. If you would like some resources to do this, this is our main website with all of our sanitation resources. It's just nyc.gov/sanitation materials. I'll put that in the chat as well once I can see it and then stop sharing my screen. But this is really great for all composting stuff, all recycling stuff, all trash stuff. I will say, if you are looking to order one of these decals here, we have been wonderfully overwhelmed by interest and currently are experiencing a bit of a back order. So if you'd like to start using your own bin for compost and you've ordered the orange decals and you're waiting for them to come in the mail, you don't have to use them. Just take a Sharpie and write the word compost on your bin, and that's sufficient. Just something to identify the bin. Doesn't matter what color it is, the bin itself, the Sharpie, whatever. It's something to identify it as a compost bin is good for us. If you'd like to request an event, you can do so at this link here, but I'll also just put our team's email in the chat and you can reach out to us more directly. Almost done. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I think we can all agree that this program will only be a success if we're all on the same page. So we're doing a lot of things to get the word out. Number one, we're canvassing all small buildings, 1 to 9 unit buildings. The reason we're only canvassing those is because typically those are the ones who, when you knock on the door, the person who answers the trash might be more likely to answer. So for larger buildings, we're doing calls like this. We're reaching out to all kinds of organizations across the city, doing targeted emails to a bunch of management companies. My head is swimming with all these different associations and groups, which is amazing. It's wonderful. We're so excited to get the word out to everybody. But we're trying to be in as many places at once as we can. But truthfully, not everybody wants to hear from the Department of Sanitation. People are much more likely to be interested and invested in this program if they hear it from someone they know, namely their neighbor or someone on their board. So that's why it's really, really important that as I yap on and on, that not only you have this new information, but you share it with your friends and your neighbors, because you are much more of a trusted resource to them than I am in my little fleece. Uh, you probably got this in the mail. But we also sent out a mailer. We're going to be blitzing social media, the link NYCs. You might have seen something in a taxi. Again, trying to get in front of as many eyes as possible, but really the people who people are going to listen to are their friends and neighbors. All right, that is everything. I hope I answered as many questions as I could during, but I will now answer the rest.
So we have quite a few, so I'm just gonna just start with the coding and the plates. So if it's uncertain whether a plate is coded or not coded, is there a preference? Or is there going to be a problem if, I guess, regarding fines, if a coated plate or coated pizza box or the wax paper from under the pizza ends up in the compost, like where is it better to put that stuff?
If you're not sure, it's okay to put it in your compost bin. If it feels waxy, please put it in your trash. But if you put it in your compost bin, it's not the end of the world.
All right, now let's see. In terms of setting out the compost bins, for buildings with small sidewalks that have a lot of garbage, is there a preference for sanitation in terms of like how they're lined up with the other items that are going out, or, are there suggestions for how to deal with that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So, like if you're putting out your recycling and your composting, and I guess not the trash on the same day. I don't know, maybe the trash on
Yeah.
the same day. Um, is there a preference in terms of how the things go out, or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't really matter to us. All that matters is that it's if it's in a bin, which all food waste should be, it's somehow labeled as compost. You can use, like I said, any bin you like. Just make sure it's got a lid. It's under 55 gallons. Um, and yeah, just somehow labeled as compost.
Okay. And in terms of stolen bins, this isn't like the regular bins that smaller buildings are now required to buy where they can be tracked, or can they be?
Oh, good question. So the brown bins that we distribute do have an RFID. So if your brown bin ends up somewhere else and we find it, we're able to get it back and know where it was assigned. I also recommend that you write your address on your bin. I've heard of some people having their kids decorate their compost bins to make them more recognizable. And of course, like any other theft, please report it to the NYPD.
Well, okay, in terms of like violations and fines, how is it going to be monitored in terms of whether or not buildings are complying and what is going to happen, um, regarding the difficulty in getting 100%, I think, compliance with
Sure.
the regulation.
That's definitely a concern that we have as well, especially if you're in a larger building. Odds are you won't have 100% participation, though I wish you would, or we all could. Enforcement will be similar to recycling in that sanitation police would be looking in the trash to see if there is food waste or compostable material commingled with the trash. I want to clarify that I wasn't able to earlier on. There is only a mandate to separate compost from the trash. You don't have to give it to us. You don't have to do curbside composting if you'd like to continue to bring it to a food scrap drop off or even process it yourself. It just cannot be mixed with the trash. I know there are some buildings that receive more fines for recycling than others. So if that's the case, I would recommend you probably get on composting pretty quick. That you might already be on sanitation's radar as not having great separation practices. Um, I don't see sanitation police going through every building's trash every day, so I don't think this would be a constant occurrence, but it's in everyone's best interest to definitely get the building diverting that material ASAP.
Right, as much as possible, certainly. Um, I guess related to that, there's a question, where I guess in the boroughs where you've already had the composting program for a while, is there a problem similar to the way it is for like the plastic bottles that people pull out of the trash and maybe don't leave the recycling as neat as possible?
Mm.
Have you seen people going into the compost bins, I guess because of food waste?
Sure. That's a concern that's been brought up primarily about the folks that collect cans and bottles. Um, I could see that happening a little bit right off the bat, but I think those folks will quickly find out that the compost bin should not have any of that stuff. I don't think there's anything that people really want in there unless they have a desire for decaying food. So that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah. Also, something that is, I get a concern if you put your compost bin out, the night before collection, and pedestrians put stuff in or on the bin that doesn't belong there. That's okay. The biggest thing I've heard is that people will put dog waste or pet waste inside the bin on their walk. I know I mentioned no pet waste, but that's okay if that happens. That's fine.
Here's a good, happy question for you. For buildings that have tree pits on the streets, can they arrange to pick up compost from you, or how is it going to be distributed?
Yes, yes. So if you go to the website nyc.gov/get compost, we currently have two active compost giveaway sites, both the main compost facility in Staten Island and a location in Greenpoint. You can pick up to 10 40-pound bags of compost every Saturday and every Wednesday. So if you need a lot of compost, that's the place to get it. But we'll also be doing compost giveaways in every neighborhood in the spring, just because that's when people typically need compost. So if you're like, I'm not going to Staten Island, I'm not going to Greenpoint, keep an eye out in the spring and we'll be coming to a park near you.
Um, I thought I saw a slide, but maybe it's in Jacqueline's slides. How much trash do you expect to be like trash, recycling, compost? Like, what is the general breakdown?
That's a good point. In our most recent waste characterization study, which was completed in 2021, where we do an in-depth survey of the New York City residential waste stream, we found that 34% is typical recycling, like metal, glass, plastic, and paper. Another 34% is compost. So about the same amount of recycling that you have will be compost. Compost is typically more dense than recycling, so it may not have the same volume. So if you're trying to figure out how many bins you need for your building, The bin that you use for paper might be too big for your compost, but that's a good measure about how much should be going in each. And then if you divert, so 34% is recycling, 34% is compost. There's another large percentage, 23%, that is what we call other divertibles like electronics or textiles that you should donate. And truly a really small portion of the waste stream is true trash. So you should likely see, your trash bins go down and your recycling and compost bins go up. And I encourage you to repurpose your trash cans as compost bins as that happens.
And do you think, I mean, what is the advantage of having the lid locked though? Living in a building that has raccoons outside and etc. I like the whole lock feature.
Yeah.
Is there a big difference? Like, or no, it doesn't matter, just have a regular lid? Do you?
I mean, see what works best. Personally, I'm a big fan of the brown bins that we give away, slash the ones that you could buy, because as you said, there's an orange like latching lid that locks so well that even if the bin tips over, the lid will stay shut, which is not the case if you just have one of those circular ones that clicks on. But reduce, reuse, recycle. If you have a trash bin that you want to reuse, you reuse that first.
Um, well, there's a question here. You do have to put the brown bin on the curb, right? The sanitation workers are not coming into the buildings to get them.
That's correct. Yeah. I see a couple questions about fines. I just want to touch on that quickly. The fines for missorting food or organic material will be the same as recycling fines for commingling. So there'll be different, we call them schedules of fines for smaller buildings versus large buildings. So the first offense might be $25, the second offense might be $50, and then third and subsequent would be 100. And those would be given to the building, not individual residents.
Um, in terms of the number of brown bins, is there a maximum number that can be put out on the street at once?
No, the limit does not exist. Unlimited brown bins, however many you need. Yep.
I think this was already answered, free compost. Um, in terms of the plastic bags that you're recommending people use to line the bins, are those the same clear plastic bags for recycling? Can they be bought in the same place?
Yep. Same ones.
Okay. Um, little beige trash can. Oh, we got those. Um, Um, do you have like, are there places where people can look up the little trash cans for the kitchens, in terms of, my building did composting so long ago that we were able to pick those little beige cans with the white lids up for free that
Mm-hmm.
kind of keep the odors in. Are there sites where they have a bunch of recommended? Jacqueline, are those on your slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, we used to give them out all the time. We're currently working on a plan to continue giving them out because they're super popular. Like I said, you don't have to use them, but if you want to, please get in touch with us. We're happy to come distribute them to your building.
So there are a bunch of buildings. I don't know where this person is from, but there are a bunch of buildings like in Lincoln Towers area, elsewhere, where there are large buildings where the recycling is done inside, like uh, the
Hmm.
garbage and recycling go inside fenced areas. Are
Hmm.
are you going to speak to those buildings about where they should be putting the composting? Does that also go in those areas, or it's kind of a specific question? I don't.
Sure, sure. I saw one kind of similar about where the bin should go. That is totally up to the building. I've seen some buildings, as someone mentioned, do one compost bin per floor. Some keep them in the normal indoor trash area, and then some keep them outside. It's fine to put it wherever you like. Just make sure that residents know where it is if it's not in the typical spot.
So there's in terms of there was a question about like what the local law number is and where it can be
Hmm.
found. And I guess it's not listed here, but also the regulations, which are what really set out your program. I can certainly attach it to slides, or if you can forward them to me. I mean,
Sure.
I can email that out with the slides afterwards.
I believe it is local law 85 of 2023. I'm just going to confirm. Yes, it's all go ahead. Local law 85 of 2023.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, What is an RFID? Was that on one of your slides and I missed it? I don't
Oh,
know.
sorry. I think I mentioned that. That's just a barcode on the bins that we scan when we deliver it, which tells us the barcode tells us this bin has been delivered to this address. So if that bin pops up somewhere else, we can scan that barcode and it'll tell us that the bin where the bin was delivered so that we know where its home is. It is not a tracking device, unfortunately, but we can figure out where a bin was delivered with that.
Can you distinguish between biodegradable and compostable? Compostable? I don't. In
Ooh, that
terms
is,
of,
yeah, that's a really, really good question. Um, Biodegradable just means it will break down over time. Theoretically, anything is biodegradable and that anything will break down over time. So I don't put a ton of stock in things that advertise themselves as this. Um, it could be or not. Things that classify themselves as compostable mean that they are specifically able to be broken down in a relatively rapid manner, similar to a compost process. So typically, if something is compostable, it means it will break down more quickly, or it is more plant-based or more organic than the other item. You can put anything labeled with both into your compost bin. I will say specifically things that are labeled as BPI certified are especially good because sometimes things label themselves as biodegradable and they're not. But if something is compostable or BPI certified, that's typically a green flag.
okay, I'm gonna give you two more questions, and then in the interest of time,
Sure.
we'll try and get questions to everyone who's written, answers to everyone's questions that's written them in, or they may also be covered in Jacquelyn's presentation. So the fines, just like recycling fines, the question is, are they on the building or can they be assessed to directly to residents that are the ones who are in non-compliance?
From sanitation, it is specifically to the building. If buildings want to work out their own thing to incentivize or punish residents, you're welcome to do so. But from the city, it will be applied to the building.
And is there a list of what those fines are? They're increasing, right? Like if the first time you miss, it's one thing. Is it
Yes.
differentiated by building size? If you could just briefly.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is available on our website. It's called the schedule of fines, namely that they get more expensive as you go along. It's different for buildings that are under 10 units and then more expensive for buildings over 10 units.
In terms of the anaerobic generation that you discussed with the site, is there a place where people can look up and see how um, the composting works on the two sites? You had a slide with two different sites listed.
Yes, if you go to YouTube and Google Newtown Creek or you Google Staten Island Compost Facility, there are some great virtual tours on there. If while Jacquelyn is talking, I'll try to find those links as well.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to move on. Thank you so much, Hillary. And
Yeah.
I did not expect the number of questions that we have. But we're going to go on to Jacquelyn's presentation, and I think some of them, regarding education and how to deal with residents, you'll have more answers to from
Yep.
that part.
And if everyone can see my email, if your question was not answered, I apologize. Please email our team and I will answer it tonight or tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Rebecca, and thanks for that wonderful presentation, Hillary. I think we're going to be very complimentary. There'll be some areas of overlap, but we'll be complimentary. I don't know if Hillary mentioned this, but in terms of time-wise, I'm under the impression that this meeting is going to go until 7:30. So my presentation is about 20 minutes, and I'll try to answer some of those questions along the way. And then I'm here as long as anybody needs to get your questions answered. So, so now, if you're on this call, you're likely aware of the challenges that multifamily buildings in particular have in getting their residents to recycle and now sort their food scraps. I don't know how many of you are aware of the fact that multifamily buildings in the nationally recycle at only half the rate of single family buildings because of these challenges. So knowing this, we on the Manhattan Solid Waste Advisory Board, SWAB, like the Q-tip for short, developed the two guides that you see here for building owners and managers. The one on the left is for recycling, and the other one on the right is for organics. These guides are downloadable as free PDFs from the Manhattan SWAB website. Those of us on the Residential Recycling Committee wrote the Organics Guide in 2018, believe that or not, when curbside collection was still voluntary. So the value of it is that it contains a lot of learning from buildings, mostly around Manhattan, including my own, that had already figured out how to make food scraps collection work in their multifamily buildings. So long before the threat of enforcement. So I'm very pleased to share some of that evening, that learning this evening. But first, I'll set a little context. As Hillary reviewed, the Department of Sanitation is providing a lot of free resources to help building managers make this as easy as possible for their residents and staff. But however easy it is or how much support they provide, sanitation's efforts can only go so far in helping you to engage your own residents. That's because only you, the owners and the managers, really know the ins and outs of your own building, its layout, demographics, its culture. So it's really up to you to provide the missing piece in all of this. And hopefully I'll share some inspiration and specific ideas from other buildings that will make that easier for you. But first, if anybody out there, and there's got to be a few, I say that lightly, are anxious about any of this, please rest assured. It is a lot easier than you think. Some of us may have forgotten that it took a little doing to set up recycling so many moons ago. And I'd venture to say it makes our building better places to live in, so it's worth the effort. Now, let me start with some good news. Once you get going, getting this program launched, you're going to find about a bunch of residents right off the bat who are actually ready, willing, and eager to get started. They're the ones who likely appreciate the environmental and climate implications of food waste in landfills. You might, walk the halls and see some of them saying to the other neighbors, "Oh, after the first week, I hardly had any trash left and it didn't smell." So a good strategy is to lean on them to help you convert the neighbors who might now be saying things like, "Won't it attract rats? Is it going to smell? I don't have any space in my kitchen for another container." And many residents may not understand why they're being asked to do this. And it's not just the residents who have questions. The building owners traditionally think trash and recycling is the super's job. But supers are really not equipped to address all of these issues. So bringing the residents on board really has to be a team effort. So I'll talk more about that in a second. But first, let me just review, and it's a little repetitious with Hillary, but there's some additional benefits specifically related to multifamily buildings that you're going to want to know about. And these benefits really have to be front and center of every building's program, regardless of its particulars. So here's that chart that Hillary referred to that shows New York City's household waste. As you can see, organics in orange, the food scraps, food soil, paper, and the yard waste represent the single largest segment of what we're paying millions of dollars to ship to 10 states to landfill at this point. The next largest consists of the blue and green recycling streams. You're all aware of these, metal, glass, and paper at 32%. And that small purple sliver down on the bottom left represents the other recyclables in the waste stream, such as clothing and waste. Some of you may already capturing these in your building with those other special voluntary programs provided by DSNY. And so that leaves 25% in gray down at the bottom, which is not recyclable. The baby diapers straight on to construction and demolition waste and everything in between. So we're talking of the biggest single part of the of New York's waste stream here. So, but when you sort out all of these recyclables, particularly the very voluminous and light blue and green streams, what's left in those black bags is mostly food. The bags are heavy, they break, and that's what attracts the rats. So if you need to motivate your residents and your staff outside of the environmental and climate benefits, start by underscoring how it can help control rats. It's less smelly. Something that wasn't mentioned, it's a lot easier for the staff to carry, and the Department of Sanitation folks too. And it saves money on chute cleanups and buying all those black bags in the first place. What do they cost? So how do you make this all happen? The organics guide that I mentioned earlier has many tips in it. And in the interest of time, I'm going to highlight just a few of those. And I understand that you're going to be getting copies of these presentations. And so any link that you see here, you will get a copy of in my PowerPoint. So the first thing you need to do is to develop a plan. It doesn't have to be an extensive plan, but it's the highlights that's customized to the needs of your building. It should include input from the board, the property manager, the resident manager, or your super. Also, it's really good to think about enlisting the help of those motivated residents, like those who may already be on a green team, who are going to be your, let's call them the early adopters in this program. And they're so pleased with the idea that your building is collecting the food scraps at this point. Many of them, you'll be surprised, may want to really pitch in and help spread the word. So the board members have to set the tone culture-wise for a building. They have to approve a budget for things like these bins and any starter kits I'll talk about in a minute. The building managers, supers will likely know the best locations for your, and there could be multiple ones for your collection area. And the green team members or other interested residents can help with the outreach and education. So we're talking a team. The second thing I want to underscore is that you want to make it convenient to drop off food scraps. So like Hillary mentioned, it's good to co-locate the bins with trash and recycling bins, but it might work better in your building to locate the organics bins in the basement or on a terrace or a garden like you see here. And also think about placing them near a doorway or an exit where residents can simply drop their scraps in on the way out the door to work. Make it clear what residents should drop into the bins. So lean on the signage and the decals provided by DSNY, and they're available. It's really impressive, like 12 or 14 different languages, and supplement those with any other instructions that are specific to your building. So you see the decals and things that Hillary mentioned, and you may need to supplement these with custom instructions. So on the right is the sign that I made up for our compactor and recycling rooms on each floor in the building. So it asked folks not to put the food scraps in the chute, but rather please take them to the basement. And in fact, we're finding that even though our residents can simply drop their scraps in the chute, this is all voluntary up until recently, that they can simply drop their scraps in the chute on each of the floor. Our folks, after 5 years of working with this, are committed enough that they make that special trip to the basement. And I trust you'll discover that too. So now once you've got the signage in place, it's time to reach out to the residents. So besides what we've talked about so far, what else might that look like? So getting the word out likely starts with an introductory letter laying everything out, and might have some educational flyers attached from DSNY. Your residents will likely need help sorting their scraps. This will be one of the biggest areas of questions. So you might include information in that letter or an attachment on the type of pail they can use. Let them know that there's different types of collection pails available online or in houseware stores, but also underscore that the residents don't have to actually buy anything. They can simply use a bin in their fridge door. I've put this all in these pictures for you. In their fridge door, a yogurt container with a seal on it, or even a simple brown paper bag. I personally subdivided my existing trash can in my kitchen, like what you see in the upper right corner. That's my kitchen trash can. And it doesn't take up any extra room, and I can continue to simply scrape my food scraps into the same can as I've always done. I just have to aim now for half of the can. Now, something that may cost a lot less than you think, and I was glad to hear that Hillary suggested that DSNY could possibly provide some free pails for you, but something that could really cost less than you think is to provide your residents with a free starter kit, like the pails and the bags you see here. Some buildings have them, they charge the residents for them, or they charge the residents for those fancier containers that they buy, just to make it easy for them to buy these things. But as I said, just go online and type in compost pail for the kitchen and they'll all come up. So what I like about these, the green pails with the black pails with the green compostable bin liners, is you'll see that these pails have vents. And when they're lined with the special green compostable bags that you see here, they let the scraps breathe. And that process prevents the scraps from smelling, or at least reducing any smell significantly. And some buildings go so far as to provide a dispenser like you see here at the collection site. So it's really all about your building's culture. So now, how do you answer the other questions that your residents have? So an in-person, or even these days, a Zoom event can be really helpful. I kicked off my own building's voluntary program in 2019 with what I called a lobby drop-in event. We showed them how the bins work. We gave away starter kits of free pails along with a roll of bags, and included the educational materials that were supplied to us by DSNY. And just to the icing on the cake, we also gave away a small brown paper sandwich bag of soil amendment to our residents, and they could use them with their plants or however they wanted to use them. But it was important to show them what the scraps could turn into. And frankly, I was really surprised and delighted, of course, to see how many of our building's residents showed up to pick up their pail and see the demonstration of the brown bin. And you can see here that was the kind of friendly sign that I put up in elevators and where else to invite people to come down on to the lobby. And the kicker was the cost. For an incredible, believe it or not, $57. We were able to buy 4 cases of bags, and we got 40 free pails, 10 for each case we bought, all thanks to a special deal that the Biobag company is still offering. And I've included a link in the PowerPoint for you if you want to check out if they're still providing that deal. Now, are you running a very large building? You might try going digital with 1 or more Zoom calls, or even a YouTube video or 2. When Ray Moya was the environmental chief at Stuytown, he got the word out to his 30,000 households in one fell swoop by taping a couple of low-cost YouTube videos. So there's lots of options if you're willing to get creative. So that's some ideas to get you started. Of course, there's a lot more that you can do to encourage participation, and you may need to do over the long haul as new residents come into the building. You're already likely doing these things to encourage recycling, so the organics can be integrated into the recycling protocols in your building. And these longer term items are things that are spelled out in the guide too. So if you go to the MSWAB website, you'll find a lot more helpful resources on the same page where you can download the free copies of these guides, including case studies, a deep dive into specific buildings. And it's up there so that it's all as useful and helpful to you as possible. Because our goal at the Manhattan Swab is to make recycling as easy and motivating as possible for Manhattanites. where the large buildings tend to concentrate. So I hope you can see that it does take some doing, but it will be worth it, and it will get a lot easier as our culture adapts, and the benefits will add up as more and more residents participate. So there's just look for this in the last page of my PowerPoint that you'll be getting, and it's got a whole list of resources, and all of the links that I have referred to so far are on that final page of my presentation. So thanks a lot for listening. Thanks for having me tonight, and I'd be happy to stay on as long as we need to answer any questions.
Sorry about that, I was muted. So I guess one of the questions that I've seen a few times tonight is regarding how do you tell what the best way is um, to help people compost? Is it to put bins on each floor in the building, like in the garbage areas, compactor rooms, or only downstairs? Is there a recommendation for how to address that?
I as I mentioned, just whatever you do, make it convenient and work for your building. So, for example, and as I said, every building is unique too. So, in our building, we just have old-fashioned chute rooms that you can't even practically put a person in, just the drawer comes down. And so we were able to retrofit for the blue and green recycling bins, but there was no way that we could put an additional bin in there for food scraps. So our compost bins have been down in our basement for 5 years now. And I put up the sign in the composting rooms that say, no food scraps in the chute, please. And that's a picture of our actual chute. And then suggesting that people bring them down to the basement. And we have a tremendous amount of people who are doing that, even though it's voluntary, and they could easily put their food scraps down the chute. It's a voluntary program up until now, and they're taking it down to the basement.
And in terms of, there was a question earlier about like what is using a 55-gallon drum. I know during our pre-meeting we discussed that was heavy. Um, have you seen like a variety of size bins used by different buildings or?
Yeah, remember that Hillary's nodding her head. Remember that the bins are on wheels. So even if you filled them up, they should be easy for the your staff to roll them to the curb. The only challenge is, and I've seen this in multifamily buildings right in my own neighborhood, is that a lot of these containers have to be dragged up steps by the staff, and so it doesn't matter really if it's in a bin or the bags, though perhaps if it's in a bin, the building might allow these bins to be brought up in elevators.
Right. In some buildings, it might have to be. Um, Somebody asked if you could leave the last slide up with the listed resources. Jacqueline, thank you.
Sure. Can you
We
see
are
that?
we are going to be distributing the slides, and your links are you'll be able to click on the links, so that will also be
Right,
helpful.
right.
Um, there's a question here regarding when the program starts, so I don't know which one of you want to take that and explain the deadline and you know.
Sure,
Sure.
Helen. Feel
I'll jump
free.
on the details. So the service, if that's what you're referring to, is currently available everywhere. It has started. It is citywide. So yes, the program is active currently everywhere for every residential building. There will not be any fines for food waste in the trash until April. I would suggest that you not wait until April to start because that could be a very expensive time to start building this habit. So I would start now.
Okay, and I think we've actually answered all of the questions. If anyone has any other questions about procedures or how to encourage people to participate that they'd like to type in, but let's see.
One thing I forgot to mention that was a really good question beforehand was liquids. Um, I was talking about best practices. Number one, I would recommend using a bag, of course. But another reason I see problems with bins, in addition to leaving the lid open, are when things linger at the bottom of the bin between weekly collections. That's the stuff that can accumulate and fester and cause pests in the bin. So, in addition to using a bag, I would recommend that you suggest to residents as a best practice to drain as much liquid out of the material as possible before putting it into the bin in case there's a rip in the bag. This could be something like squeezing out a fruit, or if you have something like yogurt, maybe put that down the drain instead of putting it in your bin. But that's just a tip to keep your bin clean.
And somebody had asked earlier, I don't remember if it was on which set of questions it was on about newspapers, like
Mhm.
line is that allowed in the with the
Yes,
composting? So they could line like their bin with newspapers and then
that is a great idea. Yes, line it with paper underneath the bag, between the bag and the bottom of the bin. Baking soda, paper. I've seen wood chips, anything to absorb that. Also, if you just want to mix in clean paper, I wouldn't recommend it. Of course, put clean paper in your recycling bin. But if you have like food soiled, lightly food soiled stuff, to put that in your compost bin to help absorb some excess liquids, I think that could be a best practice as well.
I've seen some buildings that actually have newspapers in a bin right next to the compost bin. And there with a little sign that says, please throw in a couple of pieces of newspaper after your deposit. Certainly, when I showed you my own kitchen trash can, um, some people do, I don't, but some people line the bottom of their kitchen trash can with newspapers as well, and then the whole thing can go into the compost bin. I actually have a question for Hillary, and I have heard, maybe you could just confirm this because it's a really kind of good misconception that flies don't fly around and find your compost bin. What I have heard that when there are flies in the compost, those are typically fruit flies that arrive with the fruit
Whoa.
or the dead plants, flowers that arrived when a resident deposited into the compost bin. And so that's an additional reason besides the odor to make sure that your buildings liners are tied and that the lids are closed quickly after somebody makes a deposit. And that also, I remember those green bags. I have no commercial venture going here with those guys, but I just think it's a great system that they've designed. But the green bags are a beautiful sight when people put their food scraps in them and then they tie them. And when you go to drop your food scraps into the compost, your building's bin, you just see all these little round green bags. And it's so neat and clean and it doesn't smell because the bags, the food has been breathing along there. So I just to go back, am I on the right track on the my understanding of how flies get in the compost?
I really don't know. I am really not sure.
Okay,
But
okay,
I believe in the ability of insects to get wherever they want to be. So,
sadly.
yeah.
Uh, uh,
But
um,
somebody did tell me, and it seemed like quite a reliable, confident person that flies do not find your
sure.
compost. They are
Yeah.
brought to the compost themselves.
That's
They're delivered.
upsetting by the food I'm
Yeah.
eating. Hopefully, it's
Yeah. I didn't mean to put you
water
on the
or
spot
something.
there, but it was just like it's just such a good thing for people to know because they'll be
um,
afraid of it.
so our question about the bins, is it only the small bins that have an easy lock lid as opposed to the childproof locks on the larger bins? Do
Uh,
you know what that? I don't have enough familiarity with the larger bins to know, so.
sure. So I think what you may be referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 13-gallon bins, the brown bins that we distribute have a latch that goes like this, whereas the 21 gallons have like a loop-de-loop kind of latch. Um, yes, only the small bins have that easy latch as opposed to the more intense latch. I have heard from folks, specifically older folks or folks with accessibility issues, that the 21-gallon bin latch is difficult for them to use. So I've also heard that it gets easier to use over time as the plastic molds or changes. But in one of those cases, it might be best to use a different bin. Unfortunately, the only brown bins that are available for sale at bins.nyc are the 21 gallons, unfortunately.
But the the
Yes.
the 13-gallon one is the one that people get if they order if they contact your website and request.
Yes, apologies. I should have clarified. If you request a free bin from the city, if you live in a building that's 9 or fewer apartments, we'll deliver a 13-gallon bin. If you're in a building that is 10 or more units, we'll deliver that 21-gallon bin with the tougher lock. And then the 21-gallon bin is just the one we had extra of. So that's the one we're selling at bins.nyc.
I think you typed the answer into this already, Hillary, to for another person, but how do you tie the bag? Are there clips or they just tie it? What is the procedure used there?
Typically, I've heard the clear bags are bigger than the bins themselves. They just kind of pull the bag itself and then tie it with itself. I'm not familiar with any other apparatus or contraption, but I'm sure you could use either a rubber band or a twisty tie or whatever works best for you. It's not required that you tie the bag shut, but just if you just even wanted to roll it, that would be fine as well. Just something to close it up if possible.
Best way to handle cooking oils. Jacqueline, do you or
Sure. What I would suggest for this is that you sop them up using a paper towel or any kind of other paper product and put it in your compost bin, or that you containerize it in some way and put it in your trash, but of course not down your drain. I know I literally just said don't put liquids in your compost bin. um, so that's why I would suggest sopping it up and make sure it's not too drippy if you are to put it in your bin. But we can accept those cooking oils.
is that okay to end up in garbage? I know the DEP had when they were at one of our events, they brought these little, probably plastic, but I don't know, bags for actually you to pour grease in so it doesn't go down
Mm,
the drain.
mhm.
Um,
That's okay to put in the trash. Yeah.
We actually collect cooking oil. My super does all kinds of one. He's
Wow.
doing batteries and light
That's
bulbs.
amazing.
We have
Wow.
a lot of great
That's
recycling
really
in
impressive.
our building. And so the highest and best use of cooking oil is to collect it and then to have uh, it picked up or dropped off somewhere so that the cooking oil can actually be reused.
I think there was a small town in England where someone got oil from like used chip shops and used it in their car that they retrofitted.
Yes, I think I saw that
The
article.
French fry car. Smell like French fries. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, what about magazine paper? Like instead of newspaper, I guess like the sometimes they're slightly coated, those papers that come from
They were clay coated, the old inserts for newspapers and
Mm,
things like Parade Magazine and what have you. I I understand that you can put any kind of paper in into the recycling bin.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yes. Same, good for
these
paper, good
days.
for compost bin. Hmm.
Right, right.
okay, and the last question is about the free kitchen pals. I don't think that was through Department of Sanitation, but that was right on your slides, Jacqueline. No, no? You're not providing free pals right now, are you, Hillary? For inside
Uh,
kitchens? No.
we're trying to figure out. To be totally transparent, a lot of the bins were dirtied during storage while over COVID. So we're trying to figure out a way to clean them to make them suitable for public consumption. But if you are interested in receiving a bin once they are clean, you can go ahead and email us. I'll put our
Can I
email.
just clarify that you're using the term bin? Are you referring to kitchen
Sorry.
pails for people's countertops?
Yes,
When you say bin?
yes, kitchen compost containers. Yes,
Oh, so you do have a supply of those for New York City residents?
we do have a supply. We're currently trying to figure out a way to distribute them. If you're interested, you can go ahead and reach out.
Come to the compost carnival on Sunday down at
Yeah,
Battery Park Sunday and bring a bunch of pails.
There will be some there. Yes, I think
Away. Yeah.
Allison's on the call, and I've been coordinating with her. There will be kitchen containers at that event.
Terrific. I'm sure
Thank
they'll
you.
love it. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have two bits of information which I'll post into the thing regarding a material that solidifies oil that you can then dispose of. So
Cool.
we'll add that to our send out. And
That
let's
is
see.
really cool.
That's fry away. See, I knew it was involving chips. Um, anyway, thank you, Jacquelyn. Thank you, Hillary. And we'll forward the slides tomorrow. The recording will take a little bit longer, but we'll get that posted on our YouTube channel. And I will follow up with any questions. Thank you all for attending tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paula.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
Happy
you.
night.
composting.
Wonderful working with you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.